Hello, I'm Adelina and welcome to this week's edition of Northwest Newsweek. The 2021 federal election has come and gone, and things remain virtually the same, with the Trudeau Liberals winning another minority government. Here in the Northwest, the incumbents all retained their seats. Conservative MP Eric Melillo faced a strong challenge in the Kenora riding from rookie NDP candidate Janine Seymour, who led the polls for much of the night before things turned around. Adam Riley was in Kenora as part of our election coverage and files this report.
1 year and 11 months after being elected for the first time, Conservative Eric Melillo is going back to Ottawa after successfully defending his seat against 4 challengers, including a very strong push from the NDP's Janine Seymour. But in the end, it was Melillo with a resounding 3,300 vote lead, which put him over the top.
It's an incredible honor to continue to serve. Our riding continue to work. There's obviously a lot more work to do after only 2 years, so I'm very excited by that opportunity and thankful to all those that put their trust in me.
Seymour started the evening with many early polls working in her favor, and for a time it felt like she had Melillo on the ropes. But things slowly turned somber as the night played on. She says she's still trying to reconcile the fact that many of the issues she campaigned on will still be there.
We're still not going to have those discussions. So if not now, when? The issues that I was raising were issues that need to be spoken about, and clearly Kenora doesn't want to speak about them.
On a national scale, the results put the country back where it was at the beginning of the election with a Liberal minority government. Liberal candidate David Bruno says while the results both locally and nationally aren't exactly what he was hoping for, he believes the country is in good hands going forward.
We were looking for a majority so we wouldn't have to negotiate the difficult negotiations that were sometimes counterproductive when it came to the House of Commons. So having said that, yeah, I'm very pleased that it's going to be a Liberal government and we're going to continue on.
Melillo says the final seat count and the Liberal minority outcome look eerily similar to 2019 and believes this solidifies the sentiment that this was an unnecessary election. But he plans to continue to keep the government to account and more from the opposition benches.
But as well, the other side of that is the working committee, the work sort of behind closed doors to work collaboratively with not just the government but the other opposition parties to advance our region's interests forward.
And in a pair of moments rarely seen on election night Monday, both Seymour and Bruno came to the Melillo wrap party to offer their congratulations and reflect on a well-fought campaign. Adam Riley, TBT News.
While the events in Kenora were thrilling, the race of the night Monday was in T.Bay-Rainy River, where Liberal incumbent Marcus Pulowski was trailing at several points to his 2 main challengers. Daniel Bain has that story.
There's your winner, folks.
It was another big win for Marcus Pulowski, winning his 2nd term as MP for the T.Bay-Rainy River riding. After a whirlwind night that saw several lead changes, the Liberal incumbent finished with just over 13,000 votes. Conservative Adelina Pecchia and the NDP's Yuk-Sem both finished around 2,000 votes behind Pulowski. The PPC made a strong push to take 4th place, while the Greens lost over 1,000 votes to land in 5th. After the final result became apparent, Pulowski was extremely relieved.
I'm happy. I won. I think the final numbers weren't that different. A little closer than last time, but in the end, I think we pulled off a fairly decent win. But it was certainly nerve-wracking.
For Pecchia's first time running, she was happy with her close 2nd-place finish, along with the efforts and hard work she and her team put into this campaign. She says it was both a good fight and a really positive experience. And with the next election looming any time due to the minority government, Pecchia is already looking towards running again.
Yes, I would. Yeah, at this point, I think so. You know, I've learned so much. Like I said, I know exactly what to do next time. Not that I wasn't prepared this time, but I would be more prepared next time.
The NDP's Yuk-Sem also said she's open to running again, and even though she finished with the same 3rd-place result she had in 2019, she felt hope coming out of this election rather than disappointment.
We're still strong, we're still there. The support that we received from volunteers, from donors, and right across the region was amazing. It kept me inspired and motivated, my whole team, and I think we really we showed that there's still hope for change.
Although Pulowski was happy with the outcome of this election, he wants a better result next time.
I have to say it's a little frustrating that I think I've done a really good job, and for so many of my constituents and to end up basically the same place, I have to admit was a little frustrating. But so be it, and congratulations to my opponents and the fact that they did so well. So,
Danielle Bain, TBT News.
Meanwhile, in Thunder Bay-Superior North, it was a less stressful evening for Patty Hajdu. The Liberal incumbent and cabinet minister enjoyed a substantial lead for much of the night and will be returning to the House of Commons for her third consecutive term. Kurt Black reports.
It was a celebratory atmosphere at the election party for Patty Hajdu as she took home nearly 17,000 votes this time around. That was over 5,000 more than her nearest challenger, NDP candidate Chantelle Bryson. Conservative Joshua Taylor finished close behind Bryson in third. The Green Party dropped nearly 3,000 votes and finished fifth behind PPC's Rick Daines. Hajdu says the vote results show her that people in the region support the work she's done since 2015.
Just a real sense of joy. We had a really good campaign. We felt good out there, and we had great conversations with people at the door, on the phone, and this is just affirmation that the region wants me to continue to represent them.
As for Bryson, she was pleased with her vote total, but despite that, she is unsure whether she'll run again, instead leaning towards continuing her battles against the Liberal Party in the courtroom.
We were happy to see our numbers go up from the last two races, and certainly the public reception was wonderful. So we're very proud of that, of what we could do in 6 weeks during the summer of a pandemic. I may just stick to the law, that's what I do, and I will fight Justin Trudeau and Patty Hajdu that way for what they're doing in this riding.
Conservative Joshua Taylor was among friends and family at home during election night, and the 28-year-old says he looks forward to learning from this experience to be an even stronger candidate next time around.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It was a learning experience, and obviously congratulations to Patty if that's how the votes end up coming in when they're all counted. And we'll be back stronger, we'll regroup, and do even better next time, so we'll be more formidable going forward.
During her election night speech, Hajdu added how thrilled she is to continue serving as an inspiration to the next generation.
One of the biggest privileges for me as the first elected member of parliament for this riding, who's a female, is the number of young girls that gasp when I come to their door. And all I see is a future leader. Because God damn it, Jacqueline, we are going to have a female prime minister one day, one way or another.
Kurt Black, TBT News.
The number of voters at the polls around the Northwest dropped for the second election in a row, according to figures released by Elections Canada. It's hard to say at this point whether it was the pandemic or voter apathy amid the predictions of yet another minority government, but the three area ridings follow the national trend of lower voter turnout. In Thunder Bay-Rainy River, just 58.8% of eligible voters called a ballot, down considerably from the past two federal elections. In Thunder Bay-Superior North, the turnout was back to the low levels of a decade ago, following a spike in 2015 and 2019. And in the Kenora riding, the turnout plummeted to 53.9%, the lowest level ever seen in a federal election for that part of the region. The federal election may be over, but there are still some questions and controversy lingering, this time over a lack of voting access in some area First Nations in the Kenora district. It is alleged that 3 remote communities did not have polls available on Election Day and instead were only given access to advance voting. Adam Riley has the details.
The most notable sight at some polling stations on Election Day were long lines. But in some remote First Nations here in the Northwest, there were no lines or polling stations for that matter. The NDP's Get Out the Vote coordinator Tania says she was contacted by Pecchia Chief Dean Owen, who says there was no polling station in his community Monday. Cameron contacted the region's returning officer, who stated Pecchia requested an advanced poll due to the annual hunt in lieu of an Election Day station.
I immediately messaged the chief, and he said, no, that's not that's not what he agreed to. He requested the advanced poll. Apparently, there are hunters that were going to be away, so they wanted to be able to vote, but not everyone hunts. So people remaining in the community were fully expecting to vote on election day.
As it turns out, Pecchia wasn't alone. It was one of 3 communities that only had advanced polls, the others being Poplar Hill and Cat Lake. On Thursday, Eric Melillo, who ran and won for the Conservatives in the Kenora riding, commented on the issue on social media, tweeting, "I am very concerned about reports that voters in certain northern polls may have received incorrect voting information from Elections Canada, agreeing there should be an investigation into what happened and that it never happens again." He says he isn't sure if Monday's outcome would be any different, but he does consider what happened very concerning.
I'm not going to make assumptions about who someone who didn't vote would have voted for had they voted or anything like that. But obviously, it's not. It's not a situation we want to be in, and that Elections Canada wants to be in. We have to ensure that this is rectified, and of course, moving forward into the future to ensure that it never happens again.
Another election day polling station snafu experienced by First Nations in the Kenora district happened in Grassy Narrows. According to Cameron, the polling station there didn't become operational until 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, leaving residents there only 7.5 hours to cast their vote, unlike the rest of Canada, which received 12 hours.
And so that was a late open. Chief Fobister had requested that it close later since it opened late, and that was denied.
An Elections Canada spokesperson insists they had a deal in writing with the 3 First Nations to hold their vote on the 13th instead of regular voting day at their request due to the start of hunting season. Officials in Cat Lake and Pecchia were not available for comment. Adam Riley, TBT News.
We now know the identity of the driver who was killed in a collision which closed the Trans-Canada Highway east of Dryden for several hours Thursday near Norwick. An investigation by the OPP has revealed that a westbound pickup truck collided with an eastbound tractor-trailer unit hauling cattle. The driver of the pickup, a 68-year-old man from Minnesota, died at the scene, and the passenger, a 61-year-old woman also from Minnesota, suffered life-threatening injuries and was flown to Thunder Bay for treatment. The town of Marathon has launched a new marketing campaign geared towards support for the mining sector in anticipation of a proposed palladium mine. Signs for Marathon supports mining have sprung up on municipal property in the community. They come as Generation Mining makes its way through the environmental assessment of a proposed mine north of the community. Mayor Rick Dumas says mining has solidified itself as the primary employer in Marathon ever since the former pulp mill was shuttered and demolished during the last decade. A panel of experts will be visiting Marathon to tour both the proposed site and the community, and will also be holding hearings to discuss the project.
So we wanted to make sure that the panel was fully aware, and also not only that, but residents in our community that are all fully supportive of mining want to get the message out there. So the message is simply that we're leading on with the message as the community leaders, and we believe that with this message, we are a mining community, we want to support mining, and we're all about the future of our community for our kids and our grandkids.
A series of green signs also in support of the project have been placed throughout Marathon as well. However, Dumas says those ones are a separate campaign through the proponent of the mine. And when we come back, we get the latest on the COVID-19 situation in the Northwest. Vaccine certificates have now been mandatory in the province for 3 days, and the Thunder Bay District's Medical Officer of Health says it's going to be a learning process. Dr. Janet DeMille is preaching patience at this point, saying her staff will stress education over enforcement for the time being. And the health unit is following up on reports that many were going maskless at a pair of large-scale events this past weekend. Corey Nordstrom has more.
Showing proof of vaccination before entering non-essential businesses is still very new, and the district's medical officer of health says they are taking a progressive approach to enforcement.
We continue to work with people and educate and support them in applying it to their particular workplace. And, as we move forward, if we start, hearing about places that may not be doing it or may not be doing it properly, we'll be in touch with them.
DeMille says many locals are having issues receiving their proof of vaccination. The health unit is getting more calls than they can handle on the matter, and she advises residents to check out the provincial phone line. She adds that Ontario's website has been down due to high traffic volumes, but she urges residents to keep trying.
Sometimes it's a data entry issue where the first and second doses are not clearly linked in there, so you can't show a receipt that shows the second dose. But that's not, most people though should be able to get their receipt just through the website, and we would encourage people to do that.
Meanwhile, the health unit is investigating after reports that this past weekend's dirt track races in Oliver Papoonge and the Wake the Giant concert at Marina Park, which both drew thousands of attendees, had very few patrons wearing masks in close quarters.
I've heard and seen a couple of the pictures from those events, and I think what we do is the same as our response to any other situation where, there seems to be perhaps non-compliance with something that's in the law, like that's in the regulation. We do follow up, and we have a bit of an approach for that.
DeMille does say she's pleased with Wake the Giant organizers for their efforts in setting up an event that attempted to follow all public health guidelines, including proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test. Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
Meanwhile, the Northwestern Health Unit has reached a vaccine milestone this week, bringing it in step with the provincial average. While this is still good news, it comes at a time where certain segments of the population are still unvaccinated as the Delta variant settles into the region. Adam Riley has more.
The Northwestern Health Unit's Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kit Young-Hoon, had some good news to report this week on the vaccination front in that catchment area.
Our vaccination rates have increased over the past week, specifically for first doses. Over 120,000 doses have now been given across the region, and we are now equal to Ontario with our first dose coverage rate of 85.4%.
This comes following the implementation of Ontario's vaccine passport system, which took effect on Tuesday. Young-Hoon says vaccine clinics are still being held in the region to bolster that number, specifically targeting certain age groups as opposed to regions.
We have noted that vaccination rates are lower at lower age groups. So the 12 to 40 age group still has a relatively lower vaccination rate. So we are targeting more vaccine clinics in the hope to that group in the hope that they're to make it more convenient for them in the hope that they'll get vaccinated.
Young-Hoon notes some of those infected over the last 7 weeks were unvaccinated, adding a majority of the cases in the NWHU's catchment area are the Delta variant. Adam Riley, TBT News.
2 members of the Superior International Junior Hockey League have lost their playing privileges due to their unvaccinated status. The new provincial regulations took place on Wednesday, barring people from indoor recreation facilities unless they are fully vaccinated. It is unknown what team the 2 players played for, but it is confirmed that the pair resides from the same Northwestern Ontario-based team and have been cut following refusal to get the vaccine. League Commissioner Darren Nicholas says players will be asked for proof of vaccination at every event, whether it be a practice or a game, before entering any facilities. Nicholas is unaware of any similar cases in the league, but he does face an even larger looming problem related to cross-border travel, as the Fort Frances Lakers won't be able to travel to Thief River Falls in Minnesota for 3 games next month, with the land border remaining closed to Canadians until at least October 21st. Nicholas says a decision will be made in the coming days on whether to move those games to Fort Frances. With more companies and organizations enforcing vaccine mandates in the workplace, Lakehead University hosted a panel discussion to talk about vaccine mandates and their legalities under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Alaskan Law School Dean Eula Hughes moderated a panel with Professor Marriott Brennan from LU and Professor Vanessa Gruben from the University of Ottawa. Brennan discussed how these vaccine policies could be challenged under the Charter, while Gruben touched more on different types of labor laws.
You don't in fact have an individual charter right to make a living at this stage. There may be issues that come up when it comes to the balancing and the proportionality analysis, so the impact on the individual's rights under Section 1 and the impact on the individual. It could come up in an analysis, but it's not its own separate charter right, so you don't have an economic right to an income.
The question about can employers unilaterally introduce these policies, yes, they can, and depending on whether the employee is unionized or non-unionized, it depends where you can bring a legal challenge to that policy.
Both Brennan and Gruben wanted attendees to know that science proves how vaccinations really are the best way to reduce transmission of COVID-19, and courts and arbitrators will weigh that evidence in all cases surrounding vaccination policies. Coming up after the break, farmers in the Northwest get more help from the province. The province is expanding its support to farmers in the wake drought conditions across the Northwest. In July, Kenora Rainy River MPP Greg Rickford was joined virtually by Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs Lisa Thompson and Emo area farmers to announce $2 million in emergency support. Earlier this month, Rickford was joined by Thompson again, this time in person, to tour the region and get a first-hand look at what that funding was able to do. Now the province has announced it will provide further support to farmers in the Kenora, Rainy River and Thunder Bay regions with 50% in cost-share funding. It would be specifically geared towards water infrastructure on farms and cover up to a maximum of $15,000. The funding is retroactive to June 14th of this year, and applications will be open until January 31st of 2022. And that's all for this week's edition of Northwest Newsweek. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.